Welcome, everyone. We're thrilled to have you here today to talk about the cultural ecosystem and link it up to all of the exciting work that we've been hearing about at the SOCAP conference so far. This group that I'm with, if I can speak on their behalf for a moment, is all as excited as I am to have been invited to this gathering. And we hope more folks will join us in this room and get excited about the cultural ecosystem over the next hour. I am going to just introduce to you the three folks who are here with me today and give you a little bit of context on what we hope to discuss. And then I've asked each of them to make remarks for a few minutes because they're representing really interesting and different perspectives on this issue. And then we really want to use the majority of this time to have a conversation with all of you. So we're really hoping that this is an interactive session and we can share information because we have as much to learn from all of you in this room as you from us, we hope. So I'm going to start here to my left. This is Jason Schubach, who is the director of the design program at the National Endowment for the Arts. Jason oversees the Mayor's Institute on City Design, the Citizens Institute on Rural Design, and the National Endowment for the Arts Federal Agency collaborations. Previous to his current position, Jason served Governor Patrick of Massachusetts as the Creative Economy Director and was Director of Artist Link, a Ford Foundation-funded initiative. He has also worked for the Mayor of Chicago and New York City's Department of Cultural Affairs, and he's written extensively on the role of arts and design in making better communities. So welcome, Jason. On Jason's left is Dr. Maria Rosario Jackson, and Maria's expertise is in comprehensive community revitalization, systems change, and the dynamics of race and ethnicity and the roles of arts and culture in communities. She's a senior advisor at the Kresge Foundation, consults with the national and regional foundations and government agencies on strategic planning and research, and is an Obama presidential appointee to the National Council on the Arts. Maria was also principal investigator and author of the landmark study Investing in Creativity while she was at the Urban Institute, and we will refer to that in this discussion today as well. Welcome, Maria. On Maria's left is Samuel Hoy. Samuel Hoy is the president of Maryland Institute College of Art, MICA, based in Baltimore, Maryland. He's an advocate for integrating entrepreneurship training into art and design education and for broadening the role of creative professionals as drivers in social, economic, and cultural advancement. He's shepherded new academic initiatives involving innovative partnerships and community engagement. And in his previous job as president of the Otis College of Art and Design in Los Angeles, he also launched the annual Otis Report on the Creative Economy of the Los Angeles region, which was expanded statewide in California. Welcome, Sammy. We've brought together this panel because we have all been involved in a year-long research project with the National Endowment for the Arts and an organization based in Los Angeles called the Center for Cultural Innovation. And this report, which we're very excited about, substantiates what the people on this panel already know has been happening for quite some time. And that is that artists and creative entrepreneurs are contributing to the economy and social change and a vast array of community impacts more than ever before. The blurring that's taking place among the economic sectors is reflected in the way that artists are working and the way businesses and social entrepreneurs are realizing the value of and utilizing creativity and creative people in their work. We've brought together here this, what I would call, blue ribbon panel from the arts and cultural sector, and I don't say that lightly. A representative from our federal agency for the arts, a leading arts higher education institution, a major private foundation, a presidential appointee. We want these folks to share some concrete examples with you of the above. And we're bringing this information specifically to all of you here at the SOCAP conference as impact investors, people who believe in the power of the triple bottom line, leaders in this cultural shift that needs to take place in our economy and in our society, valuing the assets of our communities differently. We wanted to say at the start, and I think my panelists here will underscore this, that we feel very strongly that we share common cause in the work of all of you. And we want to share with you how artists can and already are creating value in communities, both economic and social value, and how artist skills enhance any of your efforts to make social change. So with that, I'm going to let Jason start us off.
Sure, thanks. Hi, everybody. Okay, that was pretty good. Let's try that again. It was almost total silence. Hi, everybody. I know it's post-lunch. Hi, wake back up. So I'm here from the federal government, and I'm here to help. It's true. It's actually true. So the National Endowment for the Arts is not an endowment. We do not have any money in a bank. We are a federal agency that receives money from Congress every year and has to spend that down. About a $150 million agency, which is quite small, or an independent federal agency. And about 40% of our money goes out in direct grants. 40% of our money goes to what we call state and territory agencies, where we give money directly to the states who then redistribute it. Our agency makes around 5,000 grants a year. The states and territories make about 25,000 grants a year. So we are social impact investors, just a certain kind of capital that we're investing out. Our investments, I think one of my jobs is to kind of tell you the depth of the kind of investment we do and what we're interested in, how that aligns with what many of you are doing. You probably aren't aware of kind of what we're doing. So at the most basic level, we go way beyond investing what the capital A arts. We certainly do invest in the museums and theaters and symphonies and operas and ballets. And we care deeply about supporting that part of the nonprofit cultural sector, but we also have a long history of supporting the role of arts in making society better. And supporting a lot of entrepreneurial projects. I mean, people don't know we give the first grant to Sundance and are continuing to invest in media, social impact organizations like Games for Change. They may not know that we were one of the first investors in IDEO.org, and everybody knows IDEO. Their nonprofit side is a longtime grantee of ours, and many of the kind of industrial design folks that are working on social change projects like DREV or Design That Matters are all grantees of our agency. So that kind of work is not foreign to us at all. We have been very focused for under the Obama administration, under kind of what we call the arts and picture. The first frame of that really came from what was happening in 2008 when Obama started. So what was happening in 2008? Okay, and what was the big problem in the crash? Housing, right? So Austin Goolsbee, who was the president's He's head of the Economic Council of Advisors, said what was different about this recession is that you could not, because everybody was underwater on their mortgages, they could not move to where jobs were, right? In the past, you could like leave Detroit, and we care about Detroit. Yeah, Detroit, I love Detroit, but it's just a truth that people moved away and moved to where jobs were in other places. So that kicked off a whole set of broad initiatives at the federal government, what we put under the term the place-based initiatives. And that was all agencies kind of working together to try to help people who were living in place. What it ended up becoming at our agency was what we put under the frame called creative placemaking. You may have heard this term. And that's simply, what are the cultural policies, what are the cultural tools that you use as you're trying to make a place better? There's no such thing as a silver bullet. If you've ever tried to do community development, it is very difficult. Many people know how to use housing tools or transit tools or safety tools. Not a lot of people necessarily knew how to use cultural tools, and that's what we kind of tried to do. So there's a lot to talk about there. That work kind of took three different forms. One was investment from us, so we created a new program called Our Town, which I'll talk about for a second. And then we were really interested, because we're tiny, we were really interested in investment from other people. So we got other federal agencies to invest in this work, and we worked really closely with them. And then our former chairman, Rocco Landesman, helped to assemble 14 foundations working together in something called Art Place America, and 8 banks also working together to create more investment in this kind of work in the field. Just to kind of make that real, what that work looks like in Our Town, we've invested in everything from Eskimo villages in the Bering Strait. They can literally see Alaska from their house. Political joke, DC joke. So, down to towns of 12 people in Colorado, to New York City, to wherever. I mean, just as a couple example projects, if you take a look at the Soulsville project in Memphis, Tennessee, that's where they are trying to do community development all around soul music. They've created entrepreneurship centers where they're helping people get jobs within the music industry. They have a Soulsville museum. It's this multi-tiered, layered community development project in a neighborhood all around music. Or take in Natchez, Mississippi, I would argue that many of the folks that have international funds that are working in microfinance, the kind of data on the ground about what those places look like is probably very similar to Natchez, Mississippi. And so there's some artists there working on healthcare access, working with healthcare insurance companies on helping people get access through art-based tools. So how many of you are actually working in Natchez, Mississippi? If you're not, talk to artists first. They're leading the way. So that portfolio grew outside of the place-based work into what we call our Creativity Connects work now, which is really where do the arts intersect with the whole world and making it better, and how do we make creativity be meaningful to almost any field. A big step we wanted to take was kind of investigate what the heck's going on out there. The last time when the report was done on this topic was done by Maria in 2003, and there's been a few technology changes and things since then. So we wanted to deeply engage and figure out what's going on. And guess what? Artists and creative people are dying to work on social impact projects. It's a huge thing. Our training systems aren't necessarily teaching that. They're already out there doing it. They are ready to be your partner. And I think the report talks a lot about and give lots of examples of where people are already doing that work. So that's kind of a little broader review of what's happened with us. Obviously, there's some things going to happen in November that might shift the direction of the federal government, but that's what has been happening and what we hope will continue happening. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason.
So good afternoon, everyone. I won't make you say it twice. I'm very thankful to be with you this afternoon, and the remarks that I want to share with you draw from a couple of different sources. Some of the ideas that I'll share with you come out of a couple of decades of work when I was at the Urban Institute, which is a public policy research organization in Washington, D.C. I was in the Metropolitan Housing and Communities Center, and I started something called the Culture, Creativity, and Communities program there. And my own background is in urban planning, public administration, and public policy, but for the last couple of decades, really have been working with one foot in those areas and the other foot in the arts, and have braided that somehow. My passion and career interest has always been on addressing urban inequality and looking at comprehensive strategies to improve low-income communities. I have a particular focus in urban places, not rural necessarily, although certainly there's some correlations there. The work and how the arts hits that, I think, is something that sometimes makes people shake their head. So when I was early in my career as an urban planner, looking at arts and culture, when colleagues were looking at housing and environmental issues and transportation and what have you, I would get the question sometimes, you care about poor people, why are you doing this arts and culture stuff? And it was a tough question to answer at the time. In my gut, I knew that it was essential and elemental to healthy communities for lots of reasons. And both Sammy and Jason and Marcy have heard me say this before, But the way I answer that question now is that if around the world and throughout the ages, in strategies to disempower people, the first thing that's taken away is one's ability to make meaning, to have aesthetic choice, to have that kind of expression, to create the rules, rubrics, and belief systems that will guide your life, right? Your culture is stripped in an effort to weaken. And if that's the case, then as planners, as policymakers, as people in the arts field, why don't we think of the arts as basic and essential to how we build up communities, right? So that's the connection for me. So I can answer that question now, 20 years later, if somebody asks me, and it didn't take that long, but sometimes it takes a minute to formulate what's really core. I think along those lines of what's core, there are some premises that have guided my work as I work from various perches, whether it's in higher ed, in the policy world, in the foundation world, or in local projects. There are some things that I see as premises, and one is that arts, culture, and creativity is a community asset from which to build, and it's one that's often overlooked. Art and culture happen everywhere. People tend to think about it as activity that's segmented in places that are designated as cultural places, like a theater or a museum or a concert hall, and certainly those are important venues, but in fact, cultural life and artistic practice can happen anywhere. It's not confined. Participation isn't just audience participation. People make, do, teach, critique, volunteer for. There's a lot of activity and verbs associated with how we engage arts and culture, audience being one, but certainly not the only way. Artists have multiple connections to publics, and I say publics very deliberately because I think artists have different kinds of relationships to people depending on the role that they're playing with them. In some cases, you think about progressive practice in other fields. In the financial planning field, financial planners that are good and progressive try to get their clients to pay attention to their own financial well-being. In the medical profession, the most progressive folks there try to get people to take responsibility for their physical and mental health. I often think about whose charge is it to help us take responsibility for our creative lives? And how do we think of artists as potentially playing that really important role in the many ways that they can do that? Another premise is that art product is important, but so is art process. And that art, we don't need to get caught up in the instrumental versus essential values of the arts, that the arts can hold multiple meanings simultaneously. So in my work at the Kresge Foundation as a senior advisor, one of the things that I've been focused on is creative placemaking. And Kresge defines creative placemaking as the integration of arts and culture into comprehensive community revitalization and urban planning practices. Kresge as an organization has a focus on expanding opportunity in America's cities, and particularly for vulnerable populations. And the arts is understood as essential to a comprehensive strategy. And in fact, if it doesn't have an arts element, it wouldn't be a comprehensive strategy. And the idea being that the interpretation of artist is something that is much more nuanced and varied than the typical default, which is somebody on the stage or somebody in a studio. But how is it that artists play a role as people who actually frame the issues that we're going to work on, or help to devise some of the solutions that communities are going to be impacted by? How do artists, whether they come from outside of a community or are revealed from within that community, how can they play a leadership role by helping others bring their creativity to bear in how we build places, how we make places where people can thrive? So there's some mindset that I think has to shift as we push on this work, because it's a paradigm shift in a sense. It requires us to think differently about the roles of artists in communities, how social change happens. One of the things that we've observed is that in a lot of the creative placemaking activity that's been supported, what we see is evidence of greater social cohesion, of physical transformation of a place, and even change in narrative about the place. And I think of these as preconditions for other kinds of long-term change. And I think it's a shift because we don't often think about that part of the social change process, particularly in the community development frame when we think about economic development as the end-all and be-all. If in fact that's one of the things that we're interested in, but we're also interested in other changes, what is it that has to be different about generative practice, social cohesion, and how we think about place in order for these other things to happen? And I'll stop there and hope that we can pick some of this up in discussion later. Thank you.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. So Jason and Maria have shared with you how at the NEA, the arts and artists are essential forces in improving society and also building healthy communities. In my remarks, I will try to lay out some themes of actually how in higher education, forward-looking and socially engaged academies of art and design are suitable and eager partner for social impact work. And that's actually important for the social impact community to know, because there's actually there's a whole bunch of us. In the US, there are 349 nationally accredited programs of art and design in education, in higher education, including over 40 standalone art schools, pretty much in most of the major regions. And there's very little question in most people's mind that the art academy is important to training of artists and designers. But for most people, maybe the image of an art school may still come across as slightly musty and somewhat insular in terms of our concerns. But the truth is that the Art Academy has evolved with time. A number of us, and certainly many of our graduates and faculty members, have keenly embraced the triple bottom line as critical outcomes in our institutional mission and also in our career practices. So using my own institution, Maryland Institute College of Art, or MICA, as a case study and drawing in other national examples, I would describe 3 important roles that the Art Academy can play in redesigning the economics in the creative ecosystem and in society at large as well. And these 3 roles correspond to 3 key ways that economics can be shaped or reshaped positively: investing in place, investing in systems, and investing in people. So the first role is about place. Mindful art academies are often catalysts for placemaking and community development that can bring about economic vitality and access to a diverse people. MICA is based in Baltimore. I think Baltimore nowadays, with Detroit and New Orleans, are certainly very much attention-getting urban cities because of our equal mix of challenges and opportunities. And strengthening the city has long been a part of MICA's core mission. For example, our campus development has been deliberately linked to benefits for the city and our neighbors. This is based on a realization a few decades ago that the college could not be strong unless the city context itself is strong, especially our neighboring areas and also the arts community in the city. So since the 60s, the college actually grew from 4 buildings to 34 properties, but only 3 have been newly built. The rest of them have been adapted, rebuilt, repurposed problem buildings. And in so doing, there was a very strong commitment in local hiring, and then in recent years, a very strong commitment in minority hiring as well. We did not build gates to protect our students and faculty, and we try not to drive out, and we have not driven out residents. So that's kind of our own version of social impact investment. But probably the best example of MICA's impact is the Station North Arts and Entertainment District that some of you might have heard of, that was created in 2002. Station North is basically a blighted urban area next to the campus, surrounded by 3 more affluent and healthier neighborhoods. And when MICA decided to homestead and moved our graduate programs into Station North back around 2003, people in the city really questioned the sanity of that commitment, risking the whole communities, a good part of the community. But that act of neighborhood anchoring has proven transformative by attracting other cultural and mixed income developments, including mixed income for artists and for local residents. So with the revitalization is still going on in that area, but it is now a nationally recognized creative hub that serves a diverse population. And other art school catalyst examples include Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, before Brooklyn became very hot, and also Rhode Island School of Design in Providence. Role number 2 that I want to discuss is about systems and infrastructure. Art schools are often anchor institutions in a smaller city, and MICA is one in Baltimore. And we are positioned to be drivers for a robust and equitable creative economy for our communities. For example, MICA is spearheading a citywide network project that's really ambitious that will pilot in 2017. National and regional funding and partners are coming together to launch a 10-year multi-sector coalition to stimulate the creative economy in the city by providing entrepreneurial support to creatives throughout Baltimore. And it will be the first system in Baltimore to build the city's capacity to serve artists across racial, geographic, gender, generational, and disciplinary boundaries. You can be trained, untrained, you don't have to be affiliated with MICA. It's really, and you can be a salon owners who think that hair weaving is an art, to actually more formal designers and artists and painters and sculptors. And this citywide project has a twin DNA of economic and social goals, and it aims to position creatives as contributors to the city's development, and it aims also to create very wide access to opportunities through an equitable support system. I think Maria talked about precondition. This is really about realigning the preconditions for a new reality to emerge. Another art school example in building the economy in the city is the Detroit Creative Corridor Center, DC3, of the College of Creative Studies in Detroit. And DC3 function as a economic development core in supporting creative industries. And the nice thing is that impact begets energy. An Innovation Village project has recently emerged in Baltimore for another neighborhood next to MICA that is underdeveloped. But what really is gratifying is that this Innovation Village did not come from MICA, or it came from actually a cultural institution. It came from proposed by several neighborhood associations around MICA that have seen the value of MICA in neighborhoods. So this is a very good case of if you stimulate the ecosystem, more will come and more will emerge. Role number 3 is about people. As educational institutions, first and foremost, art schools, whatever things we do, we have to consider them as part of our core activities of education. So at MICA, we have long determined that we're preparing our students to be wide-angle, wide-impact artists and designers who embrace the expanded role for creatives to actively engage in social, economic, environmental, and cultural advancements. So our course features, content, curriculum reflects related content, and students can access grants to implement community-based projects with related goals. And we also have degree programs in social design and community arts. And at MICA, to further empower our graduates to achieve the triple bottom line in their practice with mindset and skills, we are infusing very aggressively artistic training with entrepreneurial development. And entrepreneurs are explained at the school as thinkers, doers, innovators, and makers who get things done and who propel change based on a passion, vision, and conviction. And this is certainly kind of language and mindset that artists can readily embrace into their thinking and also into their practice pathway. So we now have a full-time entrepreneurship evangelist on campus who actually works with our students, and we also grant entrepreneurship awards from an annual pool of $100,000 to our graduating student class. They can come and compete. And we launched this program last year, and what's astounded us was that the projects really defy the stereotypical imagination of arts project. Of course, we have artist co-ops, with an economic-based job creation purpose, but we also have 3D printed, robotized prosthetic limbs to help amputees around the world, to vertical, sustainable, hydroponic, microgreen and superfood growth to serve food deserts and schools and restaurants, equally, in the city. And people are just amazed. The technology community in our region is like wow, these are new partners, new possibilities for us to explore now. So these art school graduates will help launch new realities for economics in the creative system and beyond, very much, again, reestablishing new conditions. So other socially engaged art schools include Otis College of Art and Design, my old school in Los Angeles, and the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and the list is really growing on. The kinds of efforts I've described are by no means new, but it's really exciting because just like social impact investing, it's been there forever. But now the language is, developing. There's momentum and the sophistication. So I think I hope this audience really gets a sense that many artists and institutions and agencies not only share social impact goals with you, but with our specialty in cultural action, artistic intervention, and design thinking, we can bring to the table proven and unique assets that are of value way beyond the arts arena. And in our collective, and we say our, meaning really us, in our collective long and tenuous road ahead to make our world a better place for all, we have to marshal all assets and resources to amplify our work together, and the arts and the cultural change agents really have been long overlooked. So let me conclude that with an invitation. And my invitation is for the social impact community to actively engage and explore how artists and neighboring art schools and cultural agencies can be resources and partners in the work that you do. I would say we are more than ready.
Thank you, all three of you. So I think we're going to throw this open to all of you, and I'm really hoping that these presentations and brief introductions to what these folks are involved with have spurred some ideas and questions in your minds. And we have these gentlemen in the back with microphones who are going to find you if you raise your hand.
Hi. I was wondering if there is any sort of cultural or artistic program that you've seen in urban areas for sort of school children age kids that have been really successful, and sort of talk a little bit about why you think it was successful, and was it unique to that particular community, or could it be scaled?
I'll tackle that first and then move on. I think NEH probably should be the last word since you see it nationwide. I think that it's really, I think there are good examples, and I would say anything that can expose our younger generation to arts is a good thing. But the more traditional programs, the after-school program, they're wonderful examples nationwide. I think the more interesting ones nowadays, dovetailing with the themes of this, are the ones that are more kind of thoughtful pipeline, kind of bringing design thinking and also social change ability, the sense of empowerment, the sense of building one's kind of self-identity as change agents into young people's after school and school curriculum. I think there's some very good program in Chicago through architectural design, city rethinking. In Baltimore, there are environmental program combining with the arts to do that. I think there are actually a lot of examples throughout the nation that you can gather. So the answer is yes, but I think the more kind of intentional, the more forward-thinking, more maybe 21st century ones really combine multiple goals. Again, going to the triple, quadruple bottom line approach.
Sure, I'd like to take your question and flip it on its head a little bit, if you don't mind. So we are getting a lot of interest from engineering, science, business schools that are coming to us and saying, the students that show up, there was actually a study that was done of engineering schools that said the students that showed up had a small amount of empathy. Essential to be empathetic if you're actually going to do social impact work. When they left engineering school, they had almost zero. Great, right? So they were saying, we believe strongly, we have a relationship now with the National Academy of Arts and Sciences, we've invested in, many business schools are kind of taking on this too. Because there's been a loss of arts education over the years in many K through 12 programs, I'm just quoting people here, we're producing robots, right, who don't have a creative mind, or not using that elastic part of they've not expanded the elastic part of their mind to think creatively, to be empathetic, which is sort of skill sets that the arts can teach you. You want a good example programs? There's a zillion of them. Get in touch with our arts education staff. We fund lots of them. I'm really fascinated by this, the professionals and the businesses that are out there and are some of them may have a social impact, some of them may just be about improving scientific research or the business community. They're worried about what's going on in the country right now. So they're coming to us and saying, how do we get some of your manna into our curriculums? I mean, they're going to start adding arts courses into business and science curriculums because we have to do it for the future of our country. So I've found that fascinating, and that's come from those fields coming to us.
And can I give an example? Sure. Yeah, actually, Micah is next to Johns Hopkins, right? We're both in Baltimore. So Johns Hopkins HAMI, which is their Extreme Engineering Institute, has invited, second year now, a Micah faculty and students team to be embedded in their engineering team precisely for that reason, because they were worried about their own linear thinking. They were not seeing the associative, more creative, sparky realization of what they are doing in terms of solutions. And what's really, and the reason I want to jump in and provide an example is what's really interesting about this is that they invited our team, the Micah team, to go into merge with their team, which we welcomed, not with a precise outcome in mind, which is usually how funders, impact investment do. They just said, we want to be surprised. We just know that this really needs to be kind of experimentation. So they embedded us for precisely the reasons that we've been trying to pitch from this stage, which is that the creatives bring a particular, unique way of seeing and doing things that actually need to be at the table from the get-go and integrated into fundamentally how things are designed, and the outcomes can be surprising and amazing.
Well, I think that brings up one of the things from the report, right, which is that many funders and investors are very risk-averse right now, and that the best projects are going to come out of an iterative experimental process, which a lot of funders have really been stepping away from, and is something we kind of urge people to get back into, because we're just sort of seeing that kind of risk capital. Do I sound like an investor? Risk capital, yeah. Woo.
He's been practicing that.
Like just kind of like evaporating into the ether there. So, anyways.
Maria, do you have anything to add, or should I?
No, I think we should.
Okay. Next question.
Hi.
Stand up, go ahead.
So I have a digital media company that primarily does work in new media. We create web content, web series, VR storytelling, short films, and all of our content producers are Black folks. And when you were talking about just the empathy, deficit that we're cranking out, what we're trying to do is really kind of address that issue. But there is something that I keep coming up against that I think you all might be able to shed some light. How do you measure the impact of cultural work when you're constantly in a room with investors or foundations that want you to measure impact? Measure the impact.
We have the smartest person in the country on that topic right here.
But for me, I think to myself, when you hear stories in the news of a well-meaning, good, kind police officer that is a good person, will take out their gun and shoot an unarmed Black person. How does that happen? How does that person and all of those biases that inform that choice, to me, that's part of the work. But how do I then say that my work, how do I measure the impact of my work, and convince people to give me money?
So I think that's a really excellent question, and people say you measure what matters, and the work that I was involved in at Urban Institute had to do with developing arts and culture indicators. So how would you develop metrics about arts and cultural life, artistic and cultural life in communities alongside metrics about housing, about education, about transportation, environment, et cetera. And I think two things come to mind. One could be a technical answer to your question, right, which has to do with what phenomena are you trying to measure and what would be the appropriate, probably social science-based method to deliver compelling data to policymakers and funders where they would understand it and they could see value in it. I think a question that precedes that is who cares, right? And that's one of the things that I came to when I was doing this work at Urban, because we were working in an applied way in a lot of neighborhoods, really trying to experiment with how would you measure social cohesion? How would you measure narrative or quality of narrative or empathy or these things that we know matters? And one can make methodological progress and be inventive and think about new ways of documenting and delivering insights about what's happening. But if there isn't demand for that kind of information or appetite for new ways of knowing, then we're kind of stuck. So I think the work ahead is as much about pushing the envelope so that we can say something about empathy growing or diminishing in a place, and building the appetite for people who care. So that's the best I can answer right now. So again, you could take the question in a couple of different tracks. You know, what, from a policy perspective, what are the implications of your question? And then from a methods perspective, if you want to quantify or even qualify, not necessarily just quantitative data, but qualitative information, how would you do that differently? You know, I taught a class about 2 years ago now where I was working with urban planning students and public policy students at UCLA, and I shared with them another kind of data that had to do with digital documentation of communities and community assets. It was an arts-based community documentation strategy that was focusing on cultural assets in neighborhoods, and in a neighborhood that typically had a pretty bad rap. You know, whenever it was in the media, it was because you name it, right? There was violence, there was all kinds of things that you will routinely hear about. And this other narrative was possible because there was this art-based inquiry that didn't dismiss that these other things were going on, but also brought into relief another facet of the neighborhood and people who live there and their creative lives. Something that was showed evidence that people had a creative impulse, that there was connectivity, that there was empathy, that there was spirit even in this place. And I was sharing this, the fruit of that project with the class, which was a video, and they did these books. The community is Willowbrook, and it's actually an Our Town grantee. And they had these books that is Willowbrook Is, and it was documenting things that people were doing in that neighborhood. And in the maps that they developed, they showed all kinds, you know, people had collections, they were building fountains, there was an equestrian club. Who knew, right, that all of this stuff was going on? And I shared that with the students. I said, okay, urban planners, public policy makers, now you know this. So what? What do you do? How does that make your work different? How does that inform how you think about public policy and programs in this neighborhood? How does it take you maybe in a direction that you hadn't thought about before? And there are no easy answers, but I think that's what we need to push. How do you not only have the tools to tell a different facet of a story, but the appetite to understand it and do something with it?
So I know there was a lot of questions, and I just wanted to jump in real quick on this. So Marcy and I went to the session this morning, which was about how you measure social impact investments generally, and it was very relieving that the answer from your guys' field was like, you know, like, we're working on it. So here's the answer from the community development side. We're working on it, right? And it is very much about like who the person you want to fund you, what kind of expectation they have. I think while we're really interested in this conversation, we're really thrilled that Penelope Douglas and Deb Cullinan here in the front row started this new thing called Culture Bank, trying to align social impact investments and artists. Talk to them about it. It's going to be really cool. Is that we have never really sat in the room with you guys and said, what are the kinds of things that we need to measure to prove that this work is investable? in a serious way. And these are people that actually understand that stuff. So, I mean, I've sat in so many community development rooms, and so have these guys for years and years and years, and the social impact invested in people with your kind of capital are not in those rooms. And so we have different language, we need to get together, we're all trying to solve the same problems, but I think it's very specific to, like Maria said, the actual project itself, the audience for that evaluation itself. And my biggest problem with the whole evaluation thing is like we're asking people who are actually trying to do work on the ground to also become professional evaluators. Like, I don't want to learn that. I don't want to learn accounting, that's why I have an accountant, you know? So we need better evaluators, we need better evaluative tools, and we need to fund people. If you're going to give them money to do a project, also give them money to do the evaluation, because they don't need to learn it themselves. That's my shtick. More money always gets claps.
Sammy, did you want to add something? Or should I go to the floor? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, over here in the white sweater.
Hi, I'm Liz. I work for SOCAP, actually, and we're very interested in and committed to this conversation. We're going to do an event on investing in culture shift, continuing this fall here in San Francisco, so thank you all for being here in time. There are two pieces to this conversation that I feel like are often missing, and I'm curious if there's sort of thoughts on it. I just wanted to name them. One is the artists themselves that we're talking about doing this very important work on the ground, and they're being so engaged in these social change projects, and the systemic poverty in the field of the arts, and they're 1099 workers, right? And they've been really, the arts as a sector has been siloed from the mainstream economy for so long that I think that there's a bigger conversation here about how we actually support the professionalization in the field and make it feasible for people to make a living and a long-term professional career in the arts, so that and how we're investing in those individuals to be able to commit to this work and be able to build the capacity in the communities around. So that's one. And the second is culture as the largest possible frame here, and I think it's really exciting that that language is rising up now, and we heard it so much on the main stage this morning, and Jed Emerson talking about the way that we are together, and that is actually where we're starting to see the impact investing field growing also, that the way that we are on the streets together, the way that we are in conversation together is where also money begins to shift in different ways, and just how we begin to think of the arts as part of the cultural shift and part of the movement. And I think the arts as part of the kind of untapped leverage point within all of that, where we invest in the arts first because it's going to ripple out and have a greater effect on the culture at large, and that's going to affect the way we start to build local economies and practice local spending. All of that seems to me that cultures and arts are not the last investment on the line or the first thing cut. They're actually the initial seed stage investment, and maybe needs longer term, more patient capital to see the more intangible returns. But I feel like the frame is totally opposite in a lot of these conversations, and it's exciting to hear more people talk about how we actually start to reframe the arts as the center of all of this. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I'll take your first question, but instead of an answer, which is impossible, I'll make a comment about that, which is what about the artists themselves? I think I have two comments. The first one is hopeful. The second one is actually a call for action. The hopeful one is actually the artists themselves are actually largely there, and the next generation is even more there. We are beyond millennials now, as many of you know. We are now into Generation Z, who are the ones who were born 1997, and you look at their and after, and you look at their characteristics. They are very actually altruistic and kind of very already extremely kind of socialized and very because they've never known a world that's not messed up. They really are very vested. They're very realistic and vested in making the world a better place. So that's a little more hopeful. We still need many more pathways for them to come to the forefront as artists, change agents. But I think what's the call for action that remain disturbing is that if you look at those who actually become empowered to do that kind of work, they reflect exactly the same inequities as we see in larger society at large. Not only are the ones who they tend to be more trained, meaning that they've gone to formal training like a place like MICA, they tend to be Caucasian, they tend to come from background that's a little bit more affluent because they can afford to focus on that kind of issue. So, but the students themselves and the young people are extremely diverse. We have to reconcile that too. So as we are addressing kind of socio-economic inequitable situation for citizens at large, for society, we also have to think about the empowerment pathway for change agents so that they can be as diverse as the people we try to serve.
This might be the last question.
Shall I go? Okay. I'm very excited by this. My name is Lynn Johnson. I have a business here in Oakland, California called Spotlight Girls, and I teach girls social emotional skills through the arts. And this morning I shared an Uber with somebody coming up here, also to SOCAP, who does, I wonder if he's here, probably not. He's in Japan, and he does work in Cambodia and India, he was saying. And I told him what I do, and he was like, gosh, that's so important. And he went on and on about how important it is and related to his own cultural experience. And then when he was talking about the investments that he did, he talked about, well, we're focused on more basic needs. And so based on the conversation that we're having, I want to break that down a little bit, because it was like this thing where I'm having this aha moment where when you're talking to individual people, I feel like the individual people themselves really get what we do is so important, and they get it for themselves. But when it's applied to more vulnerable communities, then they think, well, then they need more basic needs. So how, and Maria, you brought this up earlier in your talk, how do we break down art as a basic need, very practically, given what we've been talking about?
I think that's a really good question. And again, what we're up against is the need for a paradigm shift on meaning, right? If, for example, the manifestation of arts, culture, and I would say design is something that we're in it all the time, right? And we don't recognize it. So when you think about disinvested communities and the way they appear, it's not an inconsequential aesthetic thing. When a child or a family grows up in a place that tells them you don't matter because your physical environment is a reflection of something else, that's critical. That's urgent. That's not, that is not incidental or extra. There is something that is fundamental about that kind of integrity and dignity, right? So there's something about dignity in design or integrity in design that we fail over and over to integrate into how we think about communities where people can thrive. So again, when you are trying to learn a community, you read multiple texts. You might look at data and regressions that have to do with the census and what have you, but you also look at the place itself, and what does the physical characteristic of the place reveal to you? What is the music of the place reveal to you, or the stories that are told, the narrative? These are all other layers that make up a healthy community or a not healthy community. And I bristle when I know that it's easy to default to interpreting what we're talking about as not essential or not urgent. So it's a challenge. There's a reframing issue. There's a lot of work around reframing.
So I just wanted to talk about a couple things really quickly. One, did anybody see the Knight Foundation study, Soul of the Community, in 2012? And it talked about why people would want to live somewhere. Does anybody know the top 3 reasons why 40,000 people answered they would want to live somewhere? Just throw them out. Why do you think people want to live somewhere? Walkability, safety. Jobs. Well, this is a setup question, so yeah, art. But okay, so none of those things. Number 1 was social offerings, things to do. 2 was openness, acceptance, and 3 was aesthetics. So I find it incredibly patronizing when people go, oh, we need to focus on the basic needs of that community. The basic needs of the community are, art is a part of that. It's what people say. So I think that's sort of that drives me bananas when investors talk that way. But I want to just describe really quickly, because I know we're running out of time, the efforts we've made to get cultural policy into those worlds of people that's why we're here today, into those worlds of people that are trying to invest in making places better. There's been huge strides over the last 6 years with the federal agencies, with national organizations that are working on community development, with foundations. We have been piece by piece going to these folks, the Federal Reserve Bank's here and cares, convincing them that the arts do matter, need to be at the table. It's not that they're the silver bullet. Don't say that. I mean, I think some people all of a sudden go, well, we got this new shiny thing. It's the arts and it's going to solve our community. That's ridiculous. It's some of the poorest people. Someone said that. But that we need to be at the table as tools that you're using for community development. So I am very heartened by where we're going. I feel like we're catching up. I feel like it's becoming a lot more common practice. So hopefully we're going to solve some of the problems that you brought up. But things are getting a lot better, trust me. I've been doing this 20 years, and the past 2 or 3 years have been like stellar off the charts. So.
And I would just want to say that we're in a policy moment where there is this focus on place and comprehensiveness and the recognition that you can't deal with education without dealing with housing, you can't deal with housing without dealing with health, you can't deal with health without dealing with jobs. These things are very interconnected and related, and there is a moment to reassert the role of the arts in a way that we haven't done before as we think of places where people can thrive.
I'm going to let Sammy actually have the last word. I'm sorry, because we're already at 1 minute over time, so I'm going to let you close
It's
us
a
out.
few last words. I think I'll end the session with a really personal experience here at SOCAP. But as we're speaking with your question, it just came to mind, maybe I have to share. So before lunch, the panelists met for lunch after a very stimulating plenary sessions and a couple of breakout sessions. I actually kind of walked into the gallery, next to this and walk around, and I came out feeling more complete. And as I thought about that, I thought the SOCAP, conference really stimulated my mind tremendously with, wonderful, just concepts, ideas, projects out there. It warmed my heart because of the social mission, but my soul was fed by walking into that gallery and coming out. I just felt I'm a much more complete human being, and I could not put my finger on it. I know this is actually the art for art's sake thing, and but since we talk so much about policy and place and placemaking and higher education example, I kind of wanted to come back to that as just it's a very fundamental human need. Maybe our collective challenge is how do we translate that fundamental humanistic expression and need into something we can bridge and align with everything we're trying to accomplish here at SOCAP. So.
I just want to thank all three of the panelists, Jason, Maria, Samuel. Tremendous contributions for you to come these distances to be in San Francisco with all of you today, and thank all of you for your interest. And we will be posting some information on the SOCAP portal related to some demonstration projects that these folks have been involved in, the National Endowment for the Arts report. And I want to just hand the microphone to Deborah Cullinan, who's going to tell you about a connected session tomorrow.
Comes out on Monday. A couple of things that just relate to this thread, and hopefully we'll see all of you following. Ashara tomorrow morning, 8:30ish. Main stage, talking about food justice, art, and technology. And Penelope Douglas here, one of my favorite collaborators in the world, is going to be moderating a panel. David and I will both be on that panel on Friday morning at 11 a.m. And then also plenary session that we put together with Mark Bamuti-Joseph and Ra Goddess during the closing session. So I know these are not the only ones, but these are the ones, this is the thread about culture and cultural movement and how we need this first if we're going to make any of the change that we want to make in the world. So come.